Why time feels faster as you get older. A spoon rests at the bottom of a coffee cup. The coffee is already cold. Sunlight slips quietly across the kitchen table, illuminating dust particles that seem suspended between movement and stillness. For a moment, everything appears frozen, and then a strange realization arrives. It is Friday again, not metaphorically, not emotionally, actually Friday. The week that just began seems to have vanished. The month feels incomplete. The year barely started, yet somehow it is already disappearing behind you. Most people assume this is simply what aging feels like. A harmless illusion, a side effect of getting older. But that explanation is far too small, because what disappears is not just time. What disappears is something far more valuable, the experience of living inside it. And that changes everything. When you were 6 years old, a single summer felt endless. Days stretched outward like entire worlds. A car ride felt like an expedition. A birthday seemed impossibly distant. Waiting 1 week for something felt almost unbearable. Time moved slowly, painfully slowly. Yet decades later, entire years seem to collapse into a blur. Christmas arrives unexpectedly. Birthdays appear without warning. One moment you're making plans for the future. The next, those plans belong to the past. Most people think time accelerates because clocks keep moving. That's not what researchers discovered. The clocks remain unchanged. Something else is moving. Something inside you. Deep inside the brain, reality is not experienced continuously. What we call a life is actually a collection of memories stitched together into a story. The brain records moments, fragments, images, emotions, conversations, tiny snapshots of existence. And strangely, the speed at which life feels is closely tied to how many of these snapshots are created. Researchers noticed something unusual. Periods packed with new experiences often feel long when remembered later. Periods filled with routine feel strangely compressed. This creates one of the most profound distortions in human existence. The life you remember is not necessarily the life you lived. It is the life your brain bothered to record. Imagine walking through an unfamiliar city. Every street is new. Every building unfamiliar. Every sound demands attention. Your brain becomes intensely active. It records details, patterns, textures, faces, moments. Hours feel rich, dense, expanded. Now imagine driving the same route to work for the 500th time. Your attention fades. The environment becomes predictable. The brain stops collecting information with the same intensity. The journey disappears. Not physically, psychologically, and this is where something unsettling begins to emerge. The brain is constantly deciding what deserves to exist inside memory. Most of reality never makes the cut. Childhood is filled with firsts. First friend, first bicycle, first school, first heartbreak, first discovery that adults do not know everything. The world is new, and novelty is oxygen for memory. Every experience carries uncertainty. Every moment contains information. The brain records aggressively. As a result, childhood appears enormous when viewed from a distance, not because it lasted longer, because it contained more psychological landmarks, more recorded territory, more evidence of existence. But adulthood slowly changes the landscape. The firsts become rarer, patterns emerge, days repeat, weeks resemble each other, months blend together, and something remarkable happens. Life becomes easier to navigate, while simultaneously becoming harder to remember. Most people believe memory exists to preserve the past. That is not entirely true. Memory evolved to help predict the future. The brain constantly searches for patterns. When situations become familiar, prediction improves. And when prediction improves, attention decreases. This is efficient, energy-saving, evolutionarily useful. But efficiency comes with a hidden cost. The more predictable life becomes, the less consciously it is experienced. You stop noticing, and what is not noticed is rarely remembered. The result feels like accelerated time. But perhaps acceleration is the wrong word. Perhaps compression is more accurate. Years are not moving faster. They are leaving fewer traces. Scientists still debate the exact mechanisms behind this phenomenon. Yet one idea appears repeatedly. Proportional time. When you are 5 years old, 1 year represents 20% of your entire existence. It is enormous, a continent of experience. When you are 50 years old, 1 year represents only 2% of your life. The same calendar year occupies less psychological space. The same amount of time feels smaller relative to the whole. At first, this sounds like a mathematical curiosity, but its implications are profound, because it suggests that every year of your life is silently competing against an ever-expanding archive of previous years, and each new chapter becomes a smaller fraction of the story. Yet mathematics alone cannot explain everything. There are moments when time behaves in ways that seem almost supernatural. A car accident, a near miss, a life-changing conversation, the birth of a child, a diagnosis, a farewell. During these moments, people often report the opposite effect. Time slows, seconds stretch, reality becomes vivid, every detail sharpens, the texture of a wall, the sound of breathing, the position of a hand. It is as if the brain suddenly abandons efficiency and returns to full awareness. Researchers believe intense attention may temporarily increase the amount of information being processed. The experience becomes richer, denser, more detailed, and for an instant, time feels expanded once again, not because reality changed, because perception did. This reveals something deeply uncomfortable. The feeling of time passing is not controlled by the clock. It is controlled by consciousness, and consciousness is selective, brutally selective. Entire weeks can vanish without leaving meaningful evidence behind, not because they were unimportant, because they were familiar, because they were predictable, because the brain decided they required no further investigation. This means two people can live through the same number of years and experience radically different amounts of psychological life. One accumulates memories, the other accumulates routines. The calendars appear identical, the lived reality does not. Across human history, this may have mattered less. For most of our species' existence, survival demanded constant adaptation. New environments, changing seasons, unexpected dangers. Novelty was unavoidable. Today, many people wake up in the same room, travel the same roads, perform the same tasks, consume the same information. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Civilization has become extraordinarily efficient, and efficiency may be quietly reshaping our relationship with time itself, not by shortening life, but by reducing the number of moments that feel alive. Perhaps this is why travel feels transformative, not because of geography, because it forces attention. The brain awakens, details return, ordinary objects regain significance. The world becomes visible again. Researchers have long observed the powerful relationship between novelty and memory formation. A new environment creates more markers, more mental anchors, more evidence that a period of life actually occurred. This is why a single unforgettable week can feel larger than an entire forgettable year. The clock disagrees. The mind does not. But beneath the psychology lies an even deeper question. What exactly are we measuring when we say life feels fast? Are we measuring time, or memory, or attention, or meaning? Because these are not the same thing. A decade filled with repetition may leave surprisingly little behind. A single month filled with transformation can reshape an entire identity. Perhaps the true unit of life has never been hours or years. Perhaps it has always been awareness. And awareness is unevenly distributed. There is an ancient illusion hidden inside modern life. We imagine the future as an endless supply. More years, more opportunities, more conversations, more ordinary mornings. Yet eventually a strange reversal occurs. People stop counting how much time has passed. They begin counting how much remains. And suddenly the acceleration becomes impossible to ignore. Not because time changed, because perspective did. The horizon moves closer. The invisible becomes visible. The abstract becomes personal. And this may be the deepest reason time appears to accelerate with age. Not because life is shrinking, because familiarity is expanding. The known territory grows larger. The unexplored territory grows smaller. The brain encounters fewer surprises, records fewer discoveries, creates fewer landmarks, and the journey begins to blur. But hidden within this realization is something unexpected, a possibility. If novelty expands time, if attention expands time, if awareness expands time, then perhaps the experience of life is not entirely beyond our influence. Perhaps the clock is not the true architect of our existence. Perhaps attention is. The spoon is still resting at the bottom of the coffee cup. The sunlight has shifted. The dust continues drifting through the air. Nothing appears different, yet everything is. Because somewhere between childhood and old age, most people begin searching for more time. When perhaps the thing they truly miss is not time at all. Perhaps what they miss is presence. The ability to stand inside a moment before it becomes a memory. To notice. To observe. To remain awake. Because in the end, the great mystery is not why time moves so quickly. Time has always moved at the same speed. The mystery is why so much of life passes through our hands unnoticed. And perhaps the final tragedy is not that our years are limited, but that entire pieces of our lives can disappear long before they are over. Quietly, gradually, one familiar day at a time.